All right, welcome back. This is the third part of the rankings video. I actually accidentally ended the last video, so we just decided to cut it. It's a good 30-minute video, and then this will be the third part. We'll finish the center fielders, DHs, and get into the pitcher rankings after this. So next up on our center field ranking list, at the number 4 ranked center fielder, we have Kevin Faulkner. What can you tell me about Faulkner's profile? I know you really liked him in the draft.
Yeah, that really thought it was the steal of the draft at 11th overall. Another one of those Clemson outfielders from that draft. He's fallen a bit for me in terms of potentials, but still like him a good bit as a 60 potential power guy with 65 range in center field. Adding that with Kennedy, who we had on the list already for the Angels, that gives them some dynamic defensive options. Maybe you see that if Halpin sticks around, you see Faulkner in left and Kennedy and right, and that makes for a fun outfield here in a couple of years. But he's still a little bit too strikeouty for me right now. Struck out nearly 160 times between A and high A this year. But he's certainly dynamic, right? He can hit for extra bases. He can run pretty well, play good defense. So still has the tools you look for in a guy, but just needs to start developing a little bit as a 23-year-old.
Yeah, I think at number 4, we have him pretty high on this list based on his potential. Pretty bad 190 batting average this year as a 23-year-old in high A. So he's pretty raw for his age, and the 35 currents of that age aren't great. But I think, yeah, like this, the potential is just so high, you don't want to give up on him, and still has a big ceiling. Yeah, I think he's not quite as polished as a lot of these other guys in this group. But if he does reach his ceiling, like you mentioned, that's just a real impact player. So we'll keep an eye on him. Next up, we have Jerry Swain. Swain is fantastic. These top 3 are really special prospects. These top 3 center fielders you're about to get into. Number 3 on the list, Jerry Swain. Unbelievable profile. I think your scout actually has a little higher range on him than mine at 70. A lot like the corner outfielder we talked about earlier, Vinny Fernandez on Washington. Really similar profile. They're both really good athletes. Both have that 70 hit tool with a little bit of power. Swain is just so good for his age.
Yeah, incredibly impressive as spent a lot of the year as a 19-year-old to do what he did, really for the majority of the year in high A, but even into the year with a bang in double A. So showing as just as a 20-year-old, he's pretty ready to go. But former third overall pick, dynamic bat where he, should hit for a high average, but especially if that home run power comes along, he's got the gap already. So nearly 40 doubles for him this season. So that's playing up. Crazy to see as such a young kid, and especially with that 70 range. Love that he's a hard worker, and can't imagine he won't just continue to develop and be a really fun option for the Royals.
Yeah, absolutely love that prospect. One of the best in all of baseball. Probably about maybe 15, 20 guys in the minors right now I would consider that are pretty developed. Obviously, like again, not including those 20, 80 international complex guys. But for guys that are kind of decently developed, I'd say one of probably 15 or 18 for quote unquote franchise type players in the minors right now between pitchers and hitters that you can really that have that ability to be 3.5, 4 WAR plus type players that you can kind of build your team around and be like a core player on like a championship level team. So really special talent there. And these other 2 guys are just as good here. Ruben Godinez is unbelievable in Arizona. This guy, oh my goodness, that 80 gap power against both lefties and righties just jumps off the page when you look at that profile. It's just like a sore thumb. Unbelievable skill set.
Yeah, he's going to be so fun to watch this year. 21, so you'd think he's, a little bit underdeveloped, but outside of the home run power, for me, he's getting pretty close to being there. 52 doubles, 16 triples, 14 home runs between high A and double A. You can see that WAR up around 6 combined between the 2 levels. With the 65 range, so he's good enough to be a defender and center. Could be an elite left fielder if that was the move for him, but with that sort of gap and ability to hit for extra base hits, he is going to be super fun to watch, and a guy who, if they decide to give him the reins, I think there could be a corner outfield spot opening up for him. If they decide to go with him to start the year, could be a rookie of the year guy.
Yeah, what an absolute monster. I think there's actually a chance these top 2 center fielders might be my number 1 and 2 ranked players. They're just both so special. Godinez, and then who we're about to talk about, Joe Blankenship. Blankenship is you don't have to talk much about him. This guy is just a clear franchise player, one of the best prospects in all baseball in the last decade that we've had. Probably maybe the number 1 guy on this list with all positions combined. Just an outrageous bat there. Looks like Tony Guerra, but can play center field. Just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, with how far along he is in his development, and granted, he was just the first overall pick this year, but just seeing the, at least 35s and 40s across the board, tough not to consider him the number one prospect in baseball, especially if he starts to grow into that 65 home run power. But was really good right away in low A. It's going to be a really fun year. He'll probably stick in the minors for at least one more full season as he starts to build in those potentials, but with the 65 range, consider center could be a really elite left field or right field defender if that push comes for him. But good athlete, fly ball spray hitter, basically everything you love to see. So love it as a Tennessee native, seeing him going to be good for the White Sox here soon.
Yeah, absolute monster. What an amazing guy to build your team around. Next up, we have Robbie Cazares. We're actually jumping into the DHs now. This guy was a former 1-1, absolute monster gap power, also like Godinez, as we just talked about. This guy looks like he could be a decent first baseman. Probably can't really survive in left field there in the major league level 35, although he does have a 70 arm, so it's like the bat is so good. Maybe you'd put up with a very lackluster defense. If you were really hurting for bats, but most likely settles in at the DH spot, I think. Really, really, really big time bat. Doesn't have a plus plus approach, but he hits the ball really hard. 65, 80, 60 of the big three categories there with the bat on ball. What do you think? Also a line drive hitter, which you like to see. What do you think about that big time bat?
Yeah, I mean, it's really good. Like you said, he could be a fine enough left fielder or a fine enough first baseman, but you really just with this kind of bat, I don't even think you want to bother. You just slot him in a DH, and he's pretty ready to go for me. You look at his splits and how good he is against right-handed pitching right now. That's a really good bat. Tied with Chris Thomas for the AFL lead in home runs, really dynamic. I think in Texas is looking for some pop offensively, and I think this is a guy that needs to start next year in the majors and be an impact bat for them.
Yeah, really core middle of the bat, middle lamp type order there. So really good bat. And then right above him, very close on these rankings, just like Sheets is had the little bit better approach, but very similar bats. Sheets was another very high draft pick, fifth overall a couple years ago. Also 21 years old, switch hitter. Sheets is really good against both sides of the plate, which I know Nick really liked about him. Bunch of teams have asked for him in a trade. Detroit loves the future of AJ Sheets. This guy we have as our number one DH prospect.
Yeah, he's just a little bit more well-rounded than Cazares in terms of especially what he can do with getting on base with a little better eye. The switch hitting ability and good against both sides is also a plus. Be interesting to watch how he develops. He still needs to come along a bit with his categories and just turned 21, so he's got some time, but it's the potential profile of an absolute masher. Kind of that combination of the gap and home run will play up great in Detroit too. So he's a perfect fit for them and maybe an eventual, heir apparent to Hirano when his time comes.
All right, so now we're going to jump into the pitchers. We've done all the position players now. Um, Now at the pitcher side of things, we have two lists. We have one that's a kind of clear starting pitcher list, and then we have a fringe starting pitcher slash relief pitcher that's kind of guys that are close to being starting pitching prospects, but have a big flaw or multiple small flaws that make them kind of really iffy. So we'll start with the legitimate starting pitchers here. Orlando Olvera. This is a guy we have a lot lower. I think the OSA has him in the top 25. I personally, even though he's mine, I don't think he's quite at that level of prospect. We have him as kind of like the number 15 pitcher on this list or something, 16. This guy has a really cool profile overall as a lefty with elite strikeout numbers and stuff, but unfortunately, he just can't keep the ball in the park, which unfortunately is the most important part about being a pitcher, is just keeping the ball in the park because that's how most of the runs come for nowadays. Uh, Olvera is obviously just probably always going to be the same type of pitcher. Just put up major strikeout numbers, really low walk numbers with the elite control, really good hold, stamina, pretty polished. Just unfortunately, hopefully, hopefully not, but just giving up one or two home runs a game. But pretty straightforward profile there. Anything you want to add on Olvera?
Yeah, no, I mean it's tricky putting him 15th, right? He's probably got the best stuff of any pitcher in the minors. It's tough to give up too many home runs when you're only giving up 3 or 4 hits a game, but he still finds a way to. Either way, he's going to be really fun to watch every time in and out. So be excited to watch him as hopefully he gets a chance to at least try to be in the rotation next year.
Yeah, it's kind of like three outcome pitching almost. Pretty must see TV when he's up. Kind of like Javi Baez as like the Javi Baez version of a pitcher, where it's just like super exciting to watch, and he's just a crazy free swinger. Javi Baez at the plate and just strikes out a ton, but he makes some exciting plays. And I think Alvaro would be the same. He just would either have some spectacular swing misses. 280 changeups is one of the coolest things I've ever seen in this game. 80 circle change and 80 changeup and 80 fastball. So essentially 3 pitches identical, all 80s, just absolutely ridiculous. Be of anyone on this entire game, I think he'd be the most fascinating just to watch on the mound. It's just unfortunately the pitches just don't move whatsoever. But even though he has that really high rated slider, next up we have Javon Dill. This is your guy actually, Javon Dill. A really, really, really talented dude. Throws real hard. Bunch of stuff to like about that profile. Pretty safe 3-pitch mix. What do you like about those guys? You got the
Yeah,
fastball, changeup, knuckle. That's pretty cool.
yeah, he's been really had a really good season in the minors. Almost 6 WAR between AA and AAA this year. And I gave him a late call just because of how good he's been. Has a really strong case to be in my rotation next year. He's pretty close to completely polished off. Just needs the change up and knuckle curve to come along a little bit, but he's pretty much there. Good fastball, throws hard. 55 or better for me in every category. So that's a solid middle of the rotation arm without many flaws.
Yeah, nice and safe there. Next up, we have Mike Obi. If any of you watch Sons of Anarchy, and then Sublette. Sublette has a really interesting profile. Pretty kind of in the middle of Olvera and the guy you just talked about. Not quite polished, also not quite that 30 home run movement there. So Sublette's kind of in the middle there. He has that pretty electric stuff. Can keep the ball in the park decently. Also has a nice 4-pitch mix there. Ground ball guy. A lot to like with his profile. Also humble.
Yeah, the Spiders trade for him, obviously with hopes that he is a guy in their rotation. He gets 6 starts down the stretch this year. They went fine. Actually had some batted ball luck considering all the things. 6 home runs is in 34 innings isn't great. Probably higher than he'll end up giving up over the course of a full season, but yeah, really good. The cutter and the forkball are 2 fun pitches to have as your top 2, and it's pretty electric stuff if it gets up to a 65, which my scout thinks. So throwing 101, a really good chance to be a middle of the rotation starter for sure.
Yeah, I like that profile. This next guy is really interesting too. Kevin Childers. This guy has crazy control. Philly has a really nice starting rotation, so it'll be tough for this guy to crack in the majors, but definitely good enough to be in the bullpen at something like that, a long reliever, emergency starter. This guy has unbelievable movement control combination. What else do you like about that profile?
Yeah, you say 60s high movement, but for that Philly rotation, it'd be on the lower end, which is crazy. It's a tough rotation to crack into, right? World Series champions. They got some really good arms there, but really has the look of just a perfect 5th starter. He's going to throw strikes. He has a good 5-pitch mix, and is just pretty polished here as he's just turned 25. So be interesting to see where he kind of finds his spot. If it's just waiting it out for an injury or kind of being a swingman type, but or used as a trade chip. He's got a potential in the rotation eventually, so it'll be interesting to see how he works out.
Another Clemson boy too. What that school's really turned into a baseball
Factory.
powerhouse. All right, Jimmy Granitto is next. Jimmy has really, really cool kind of qualities about his profile. He has the really high movement, the really high curveball. Interesting, kind of fringy guy. Could probably move him over to the other list as a fringy starter. The fact that the kind of iffy 3rd pitch there, it says borderline starter. Only having that 45 changeup, as we've learned, you kind of need the 55 to kind of be like a legitimate starter for that to go away. But pretty nice profile regardless.
Yeah, he's not getting any defensive help in the minors, right? BABIP's up over 400 this year for him, but still found a way to not get, too terribly destroyed in AA and AAA as a quite not completely polished product. Really solid across the board. A lot of, if he gets to where he should be, a lot of Dill similarities with the 170 pitch and the other few just a touch lower, and all 55s are better across the board for me. So, the Royals do a good job in developing pitchers, so we'll be excited to see if he just takes a little more jump, especially if he controls the walks a little bit as he's struggled as he's moved up levels. Just a 2031 pick, so no real rush on him. He'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, really. Really interesting guy here coming up. Jesus Jimenez is really neat. Miami has a lot of talented guys on these lists. Really good first baseman, third baseman, and a couple arms that are real nice. Jesus here has a crazy movement control combination, just like Childress a few picks ago. But that number one pitch is quite a bit better than Childress. So he only has three of them, unlike Childress, who had five. So kind of similar profiles in that way. Also, really love to see the mentals, the high intelligence with the ground ball, throws hard, just kind of a lot of stuff to like about this profile. Really nice piece in Miami to build around.
Yeah, we touched on Crocker and Verdon coming up late and performing well, and Jimenez did the same thing, right? Comes up and over 11 innings, just gives up one earned and strikes out 13. So really solid debut for him late in the season as well. That 70 fastball is great. Just needs a little help on that slider coming along, and it's a nice fit for that park, a team that plays good defense there in Miami, and he's going to be an easy rotation piece for them, maybe to start 2033.
Just looking at his game log there, that last start there in the majors, like you said, he came up in 6 innings, only 0 walks, only 4 hits, 1 run in 6 innings. An absolute phenomenal debut, but unfortunately gets the L. Couldn't get the W on his first ever debut, but what a nice start for a young pitcher there. Hopefully a sign of a lot more good things to come there in that Miami career. Next up, we have Chris Logan. Probably, in hindsight, probably could have been a little higher on this list. A really talented pitcher. These guys are all pretty good, so it's pretty close. But Chris Logan definitely deserves a spot up here. What a talent. This guy has an elite control numbers here and the really good pitch mix. A lot of stuff to like about this profile. He came back in the deadline trade for Andy Lull, who performed really well for Boston in the playoffs, so kind of a win-win for both sides.
Yeah, he's a fun option here, as a lot of these guys are power pitchers that we've seen, and he's more of a finessey. That secondary stuff with that plus curveball and changeup would be fun to watch. Really is an innings eater too. You look at his game log in AAA, and he's going 8 innings, 7-6 almost every outing. So the guy can last a long time. It's a perfect, mid back rotation piece. But especially with those 2+ secondary pitches, I think it's a good chance he's in the rotation to start next year for Nashville.
Yeah, but can't ever have enough guys that have like 60s and 70s across the board as a pitcher there. So really nice looking profile there. A lot of green and blue. Next up, we have Tim Spencer. Spencer is another Nashville guy. Very similar profile as the last guy. Very similar, just a little bit different development pass. Spencer's control is not nearly as far along, but it's still not bad. It's just not the super developed like the last pick there, Chris Logan, but also has pretty electric stuff with the 95 mile an hour, 55 stuff, 70 fastball, big time slider, big strikeout pitch there.
Yeah, just think, even though he's not as far developed, just a slightly higher potential on Spencer as a big body at 6'6" that throws 95 right now. Really good fastball slider combo. Had a really nice year in high A too, just in his first full season removed from the draft. So he's put up nothing but great numbers twice in a row in the minors. So especially as kind of what his calling card and the control continues to develop, he's going to be a really fun arm to watch.
Yeah, I love that career path too. Love those top college guys getting a little feet wet in rookie ball that first year, and a little short season, then doing the jump to high A, which is pretty cool. So I love how the Nashville's handling that development too. Pretty nice prospect. Next up, we have Dave Bindel. Dave Bindel is really talented dude. A young guy that has crazy high potentials.
Yeah, a lot of these guys are, former first, second, third round picks that have just kind of lived up to their development. Bindell from a 2029 20th round pick has really come out of nowhere, and really hadn't put up numbers until this year in A ball. So, really nice fastball and potential curveball combo. Everything at 55 or better for me. He's a hard worker too, good personality. He's going to take some time to develop as kind of a guy who started off real low in his currents, but a really nice season in A ball with 3.7 WAR and a 3.30 ERA. So he's flown up prospect rankings. I think he's now well inside the top 50. So going to be fun to watch him develop.
Yes, crazy career path of development there. Started last year at 35-40, 35-45 movement, and has jumped up about 15 points in that between 10 and 15 points. And you can see that too. The home run numbers got cut in half there. In 64 innings, let up over 1.1 per nine, and then this year jumped down to 0.4. So pretty impressive and progression out of him. So if he can keep that up, he's going to be really special. Juan Vargas is the next prospect on this list. Now we're getting into some real nice pitchers. Vargas, you'll start to notice these top guys. Essentially, what separates them from the bottom 8 or 9 on this list is the stuff, and the top pitches there. Like these top guys having, and a lot of those guys we talked about had the high movement and control, nice polished pitchers. But these top guys all kind of fit the profile of having that. Like once you get into Vargas's level here, you get 55-60 stuff. That is the type of guy that can really bedazzle hitters at the plate there and make them look silly. Big time curveball out of him. Over the top 12-6 curveball would be pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, Vargas and Dill are going to be in a fun battle for me, I think, for the back spots in my rotation next year. But yeah, like you said, that over the top from a 6'6" guy, that curveball would be really fun to watch. Didn't have quite the numbers that Dill had in the minors. Still has a little bit of polish to go. Particularly was walking a few two guys in the minors this year. If that changeup wants to come along, that would just be a kind of a cherry on top in what's already a pretty good profile. So excited to watch him. He may need just a touch more seasoning than Dill, but like his potential as more of a strikeout guy.
Yeah, pretty electric stuff there. Another guy that has a similar profile here is Tony Calva. It was pretty close between him and Vargas. I think our tiebreaker came down to the fact that Calva was a lefty, but both guys were really, really close, I think, in the rankings. What do you like about Calva?
Yeah, Calva is a lot like Spencer, who we touched on, is really just done nothing but perform since he was the 15th overall pick in 2031. Was really good in low A then and posted 4 WAR between A and high A this year. Really high movement from him. Like to see that. The 4 pitch mix, especially as he grows into it, is a big plus to have. So I think that the question for him is going to be the strikeout numbers have started to go down as he's gone up levels. So as that continues to come along, he could be a really solid pitcher with his ability to keep the ball on the ground.
Yeah, really exciting if he can get that screwball. Because right now, that's by far his worst pitch, but has the highest potential. I got a 40-65 on that, so that'll be interesting if he can get that pitch. I think he'll be able to fully develop. That'll be really cool. So really cool combination: fastball, sinker, slider, screwball. Really interesting. Kind of a rare mix of 4 pitches there, but really probably I think our top ranked lefty on this list. Not too many elite lefty pitchers in baseball right now, so Calva comes out pretty high on this list. The fact that he's a lefty. Next, we get into our top 5. Velasquez here is the guy in Boston. He is electric. This guy has major velocity. Comes out at 65 stuff as a reliever. I think 55 or 60 as a starter. Big time fastball combination. 101 mile an hour, 70 fastball is pretty exciting.
Yeah, right. Good personality too as a spark plug. So you have to think he, if not in the rotation for the Red Sox, in what's kind of an aging rotation, he finds a spot in that staff somewhere. Solid enough numbers. He got hurt towards the end of the year in AAA this year, so you got to worry about the fragile tag a little bit for a young guy. But the 70 fastball, throwing 101, it's a guy you got to give a shot in the rotation with that kind of profile, if you ask me. So. Like the pitch mix, it's all good. He's, good hold runners as well, which is always good to see for a righty. So a lot of things to like about Velasquez, and at pretty much fully developed, he should be ready to go next year.
And we'll add on, he came over in the Luke Leto trade back in the day from Montreal. So that trade's worked out pretty well for Montreal as Luke Leto's developed into a top 20 player in baseball. But Velasquez, no slouch either. So he could even out that trade a little bit in the future, hopefully. Another guy right after him that was actually just his teammate until very recently, Isaias Orta. I spelled his name wrong here. Isaiah is a guy that, oh, I spelled it wrong again. I spelled Isaiah wrong. Oh, Isaiah, that's right. Isaiah is a beast when it comes to the stuff and control. A little bit lower movement, but still pretty good. 45 is not too shabby. Got lit up a little bit at the end of the year, it looks like, after the trade. A couple real bad games for him to finish off the year, but the overall numbers for the entire year were pretty solid. Had a good first half and has a lot to like about that profile.
Yeah, just a little bad luck. I think once he got to Nashville, the strikeout numbers go up and the walk numbers go down. So you think things would go well, but the ERA does jump a point and a half. Like you said, those two that fastball curveball combo is elite. It's a really good forkball too, and just having kind of the show me changeup is good enough. 80 stamina, so can pitch forever too. Needs just a touch more seasoning to fully build into all his stuff potential. But he's striking out 9 batters per nine in AAA to end the year. So I don't imagine he needs a ton to start next year. Just might not be the most polished as Nashville has a lot of arms here up and coming.
Yeah, so he's the other piece that came back in that trade for Andy Lahl. So we talked about earlier, just to show on the screen one more time. Chris Logan was the other piece. So they got Chris Logan and Orta back in the trade for Andy Lahl. That trade looks like it'll work out for both sides as Nashville gets 2 real impact arms for the future with 12 years of combined team control. And it's kind of already worth it for Boston for how incredible against in the playoffs there Andy Lahl was. So absolute devastating Game 5 performance to shut down Montreal's lefty heavy lineup to beat them 3-2, 5 innings, 1 earned run in the playoffs, and then came out, had a pretty nice performance in a loss against Detroit, 5 innings, 2 earned runs. So already proving at the highest level there. So I really like that trade for both sides, and hopefully Nashville can get some pretty good performance out of one of those two guys at least. But pretty even trade so far. Next up, we have Ramon Rosas is the other Miami pitcher on this list we talked about. The other one was Jesus Jimenez, and Rojas is the other piece we have ranked quite a bit higher. Kind of the same reason I talked about the San Francisco pitchers. The polished guy was a little bit lower, and then we ranked Rojas pretty high because the electric stuff. Amazing. 101 miles per hour with a 75 changeup is incredible.
Yeah, I love Rosas. You see his morale's unhappy, and it's probably because all those other dudes got called up late in the year, and he couldn't grab it along with them. But yeah, like you mentioned, 101 with a 75 changeup is all kinds of pretty to look at. This stuff is electric. He ran into a bit of control problems, 4.5 walks per nine in AAA this year. So I still have a 5 potential jump for him in that, and I think that would help him out a ton. But especially kind of as a kind of the opposite of Jimenez, where he's going to be the strikeout guy. That's going to be a fun duo to watch grow together, and could easily see both of them being a part of the rotation to start next year.
Yeah, pretty cool how they have the two little duos, the first and third base duo position players, and then the two pitchers. Absolutely
Hmm.
love the future in Miami there with all those guys. Really exciting group. Next up, we have Devin Stone. We're up to number 2 now on this list. Devin Stone, one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. Pretty clear why. Just really good against home runs. The stuff, if you take that out of his profile, he'd still be solid and maybe near the end of this list. If he had like 55, 50, 55 type thing with 3 or 4 pitches, throws hard, still be pretty good prospect. But it's this movement that if you look at his numbers, he's just every level he's been at in the minors, just really good, just not letting up the long ball. So really safe pitcher, not going to be insane, maybe like 13 strikeout performances or anything. Might walk a couple guys, but just always that 70 movement as a starter with throwing that hard with high work ethics. Just too many things to like not to have ranked up pretty high here.
Yeah, no, I mean, you mentioned it. It's about as safe to be a good middle of the rotation starter as it can be, especially, for me, he's still 5 off his stuff and 5 off his control. So if that comes along, granted, he's about to turn 25 here soon, but he's a good personality and he's clearly a hard worker too. So about as safe as it gets. Going to be a good, solid pitcher right away with his ability to limit home runs. Tough not to like everything about Stone.
And number 1 on this list, we have Gabe Baldwin. This guy comes out incredibly ranked high in all the categories there. Fastball, knuckle curve, cutter, all really good pitches. Everything you look for in a top of the rotation starter.
Yep. No, he's pretty clearly in terms of the guys who are along with their polish. He's pretty clearly the top pitching prospect for me. The everything grading out is at least 60 or better is something that we don't even see really close among the other pitchers on this list. But yeah, the potential 70 fastball with a 75 knuckle curve. He's durable and he can last with that 70 stamina. Just a couple extra show me pitches. So he's got 5 pitches total in the repertoire. Going to be fun to watch him. I think there's no way he's not in the Angels rotation to start next year. which is pretty impressive for a guy who was a JUCO pick just a couple of years ago. So excited to watch him. He's growing a little unhappy in the minors, and I think I can see why he's ready to go.
Yeah, that profile is pretty rare. Like that really, that's essentially what the aces look like that when they're young, like the Quinteros of the world, guys that, like you said, have the 60 and everything. Pretty rare. Only a handful of guys in the majors that have those qualifications. So really, really bright future there. Pretty cool too. The Angels have another young player there, Ramos, a couple of big explosive young arms with some major strikeout potential. So it'd be cool to see how he develops, plays the next few years. Next up, we have their risky and fringy list. This list is guys that are pretty talented, just as talented as these guys on this list, but just aren't quite as safe. Like a lot of times, the park, you really need the three, like 55, 50 pitches to be a starter in high stamina. So either most guys on this list either have like really bad mentals or like a third pitch that's not very good, or they have like the low stamina, just one kind of big flaw to make them just not quite fit the qualification of the top list of the safe players and develop. But these guys are just kind of like one thing off, but pretty good prospects in their own right. So the bottom of this list, we have Josh Whitaker. Again, he kind of fits that description because a couple little flaws, the fragile and the slider, but a pretty electric profile other than that. Pretty amazing talent there with the fastball and changeup combination, how high those ratings are.
Yeah, no, he feels still pretty safe to me. The fragile, scary, right, is someone who just turned 21, so you don't love seeing that. But yeah, he's got two of the three pitches you have need to come along. Always a little bit of risk intrinsically with that, but again, if he does, he's especially for the Reds, he's the top of the rotation type arm. So next year, especially as he just started to get his feet wet and in just a short season this year, I'll be excited to watch his 2033 as he develops.
Yeah, really pretty insane 6'11" guy with that kind of changeup is pretty special. Can't imagine that wouldn't be really fun to watch. Next up, we have Gordie Campbell for the Detroit Tigers. Gordie Campbell is fascinating. He had a torn rotator cuff, so hopefully that doesn't hurt his long-term injuries kind of outlook. He already has the fragile. I don't know if that was since that injury or whatnot, but pretty electric movement and control combination.
Yeah, yeah, right. A couple things against him. He's fragile. He's coming off a torn rotator cuff. The low stamina too, right? Only 35. Um, Only the two pitches, which are both hard throwing pitches, and the fastball and the sinker, makes him feel like more of a middle relief type. With the curveball and the changeup being a bit underdeveloped, and think he could really excel in a relief role too. So it's not really a knock against him that he's not quite a starter, but I think he could be a really high leverage reliever.
Yeah, and it works out. Detroit has some pretty nice starters in that lineup. Another good rookie there, Mason, and then they had Brumley and a couple of those guys. So don't necessarily need that top of the line starter. Could get a lot of value out of a long reliever that has that kind of controlled movement. Pretty interesting player for sure. Jeremy Rosales is the next player on this list. Jeremy is a guy that has the 5 pitches and the 45 stamina. You'd think would be okay to start. I just loved his ceiling in the bullpen a little bit more. I probably do either, kind of a tweener, but I just think a guy that has that kind of explosive stuff looks like you kind of love those guys in the bullpen. A lefty with the 80 stuff potential, pretty amazing. But definitely could see him getting a ton of innings, or he could just do a split roll where he gets like spot starts or something. But it doesn't really matter whether he starts or relieves. Either way, he's going to be a heavy strikeout guy with just a little bit of work to go in his movement and control.
Yeah, it's he looks just insanely dynamic as a reliever is more the thing. You always worry when both the movement and control are working their way up to 50 and on the lower side, those kind of high stuff guys have struggled sometimes in the past. So maybe he figures it out, but as a lefty with the 80 hold and 370 plus pitches could be a really scary reliever. So it'll be interesting to see how the White Sox develop them as they need talent everywhere. So he may get a try as a pitcher. It'll be interesting to see how he does.
Kind of like a lefty version of Dylan Cease. Both have that really high stuff with like the 50, 45 movement control type profile. So pretty good career he had. Next up, we have Jared Powell. Josh Lowery. Actually, we'll do first. Josh Lowery is a reliever on Boston that has really good movement, kind of like the relief pitcher version of Stone. Might be able to start if his curveball just can develop a little bit more, but major stuff movement potential. Love those guys, whether they start or relieve either or. That's pretty high impact. 70 movement with 101 miles per hour is pretty amazing combination.
Yeah, a lot like Campbell, right? Where the only two pitches he's really got are both hard throwing fastball type pitches. So a lot in him makes him seem like a reliever. But yeah, that stuff and movement combo is beautiful for a reliever. Throwing 101 with a 70 fastball, a guy who easily can slot into a bullpen. But you know, especially with Boston, we've touched on some other guys on this list. They have up and coming. Think he could slot into a high leverage role pretty quickly for them.
Yeah, pretty exciting, big time arm there. Next up, we'll go to Jared Powell. Jared Powell fits a lot of the same descriptions as Lowry there, almost the same player, just a little bit different. Um, Powell has really iffy control, but everything else is good except for the hold. But 100 mile an hour, 60 stuff, 75 movement, incredible movement, absolutely incredible movement. Very low home run numbers. So even though he's going to walk a bunch of guys, shouldn't let up too many 3-4 run home runs, hopefully. But pretty interesting profile here. I know your scout's not quite as high in the control as mine is.
Yeah. I have it maxed out at 35, which is really the only, you know, red flag for him. You know, his pitch mix is plenty fine to be a starter, the stamina to be it, everything else plays. And you can see the walk numbers in the minors, they just haven't been very good at all. But like you mentioned, this guy turned into a reliever, especially with his ability to keep the ball in the yard. Throw 100, can last for multiple innings, pitch a lot with good stamina. So he makes a lot of sense. Not what you love to see about a first round pick, but could still be a good contributor.
Next up, we have Grinnell here, or Grinnell, however you like to say this. Grinnell has a pretty wild pitch mix. Only a 50 fastball, but incredible slider changeup combination. Very high stuff and movement. Also has that starter stamina, has that 65 stamina, but kind of is in the middle because you think a kind of more reliever when you think of the low control and the three pitches, but also in the low velocity. Just has an interesting profile, kind of like half reliever, half starter. But again, it doesn't really matter. He's just going to get you, whether he gives you 50 or 140 innings, somewhere in there. He's going to give you quality innings, I think, with that high stuff and high movement.
Yeah, and you said you got a 50 fastball. It's only a 45 for me, so that makes it a little different on my end too. But like you said, the lower control, and especially looking at his usage this year in the minors, really excelled as a sub 2 ERA as a reliever. So he can clearly be very good in that role. That's some crazy good secondary stuff. So be excited to see how they use him. But I think he could find a way in either in the rotation or in the bullpen.
Next up, we have Javon Brown. Javon Brown is kind of similar to the White Sox pitcher we talked about earlier. He's a lefty with a pretty electric stuff. Bunch of pitches there, 3.5 pitches. Has the really good spark plug personality. Another guy I just really like as a reliever. Having the 40 stamina is another kind of question mark. So kind of half and half. Again, that's why all the guys are on this list because they're kind of tweeners. But same thing. Just going to give you some pretty quality innings with the high stuff and control combination, I think.
Yeah, no, he has a lot of things about him would make me want to be a starter. You know, I think even with the changeup not there yet, he has the pitch mix to be a starter, but the lower stamina makes it a little trickier along with that 40 movement. Also, just his usage. You know, he's been a starter his entire minor league career, and now in back-to-back seasons, he's made it up to the majors. 21 combined games, all have been out of the pen. So, kind of seems like that's the way the Diamondbacks might see him long term, but. I think either way, he's going to be a really nice arm.
Pretty crazy ratios in the pros there. Let up a few home runs, but 36K percentage there in the pros in 21 innings and only 2% walk rate. So pretty incredible polish when it comes to stuff and control. Really similar to Olvera there. I talked about earlier. My guy just has really good strikeout and control numbers. Just missing a little bit of the ability to keep the ball in the park, which is why he's not a little bit higher in this list. And now we're getting into the top five. We get Mike Evans. Mike Evans came back in the trade deadline trade to Atlanta for Dylan Ray. Unfortunately, it really didn't work out too well for Atlanta. Ray got lit up. So hopefully the dagger doesn't get pushed deeper with the fact that Mike Evans turning into a stud. We'll see. Pretty nasty player though. 75 stuff, 80 changeup, big time pitch mix. One of the best four pitch mixes you'll see in the entire minors.
Yeah, he actually drops back down a level in the trade. So he's pitching in Double A in Atlanta, then goes back to High A for Oakland, and just abused batters. That stuff was too good for batters in High A. He was striking out everyone he looked at, but the stuff is absolutely electric. But like we mentioned, once you are under 50 in both movement and control, you get a little tweenerish. With that would be 80 stuff playing out of the bullpen for me. So would love to see it either way. I'm not sure if he can quite be a starter, but either way, it's going to be electric stuff, and he'd be a fun one to watch.
Yeah, I think out of all the guys in this list, he's probably the most likely to be a starter, I'd say. Like you said, it just comes down to control. I think the 45 movement is good enough. I think it's just, yeah, it really comes down to I got him at 35, 45. Is that what you have him at?
Yep. And
Yeah,
he
so
walked a lot this year in the minors. Yeah.
yeah, so if he can get that under control, if he can get to maxed out 45, I think he'd definitely be a starter. But yeah, if it sticks at 35 or 40, we'll see. But yeah, really, really, really electric stuff, which is pretty exciting out of him. Next up, we have a lefty who gets the nod. One of the best ratings in this list, kind of like Baldwin on the offensive or the starting pitcher side. The 360 is very rare, which is why he's so high on this list. It's such a rare combination to be that good at all three: stuff, movement, and control. This guy had very good numbers against the home run this year. Wasn't great. Walked a few too many guys. For how high that control is, should not be walking 12% of guys. The strikeout numbers were a tad low, seeing as he only has 2 pitches. The third one's a little iffy, but really interesting profile here. But the fact that he's a lefty with those high ratings kind of jumps him pretty high in this list in our opinions.
Yeah, the changeup is really the biggest question mark if that makes him a starter. In his entire minor league career, he's been used as a reliever, and then he goes to the fall league and just leads the league in strikeouts. So he's got the stuff to be a pretty electric arm. 55 strikeouts in 40 innings in fall league with a 248. So maybe he's a guy who wants to be a starter long term. It'll be interesting to see if the Mets see that and give him a chance to give it a go next year. But with 270 pitches and that kind of 60s across the board, it'd be tough not to give him a shot at least.
That was a good call out on the fall league stats. That's phenomenal production there. Didn't notice that. Next up, we have Tristan Calhoun. Tristan Calhoun is pretty neat player. He just hits the tweener list because that changeup just doesn't seem to want to come along. 35 now for about 2 years, but if he does get that, he is going to be. I think if that changeup was closer to a 55 or 60, that would be a top pitching prospect in baseball, right up there with Baldwin. This guy is electric. Really, all just comes down to that third pitch. But worst case scenario, he's going to be a really nice reliever. Pretty insane production though out of the minor leagues his last couple seasons.
Yeah, like you just said, back-to-back years of really just dominating Double A and then Triple A this past season. Um, It's really just the changeup, right? The changeup has to come along a long way. Is only 22, so maybe in just one off season you see a 10 jump and that changes some things. But throwing 100 with a pretty pretty standard but still a good pitch mix. If it comes along, like you said, he's right up there with Baldwin for kind of the most polished and best pitching prospects we got.
What can you tell me about the number one guy, Edgar Nava? Really, really big time blue and green popping up on my screen on this profile.
Yeah, he's the same way, and I know the Braves love him. He's got the same issue where two of those pitches are sick. That cutter and curveball are both really, really good potential pitches and have shown development. Really, the slider and the changeup both have just been slow to come along. Granted, just turned 22, so he's a young guy, but he has been in the minors since 2028, so he's been developing for quite a while now. Coming off a real nice year between High A and Double A, which is pushing him very nicely for a 21-year-old. Not really striking out anyone, so the pitches themselves are struggling to come along, but is a hard worker, so maybe there's still hope there that he's a long-term starter. But even if he's not, that's a scary, scary bullpen arm for sure.
Yeah, the ceiling on him is just so incredibly high, even if he's a little riskier. If it was, yeah, say that slider just happened to jump to 55 or the changeup got to like a 50-50, like you said, I think that would be like an ace and right up there with Baldwin with those 60-60-60 ratings. Just a lot riskier though because, yeah, those pitches are such question marks, but still is going to be an incredible arm wherever he plays, whether it's in the bullpen or as a starter. So just pretty awesome polish there of a young guy that how little home runs he let up and how low the walk numbers were playing at pretty high levels at such a young age. So pretty exciting prospect for Atlanta for sure. That concludes our list. Is there any final thoughts? If I had to ask you, who would you put number 1 and 2 of all the combined positions? If you had to combine all the pitchers and prospects, who would be your kind of top 2 or 3?
Yeah, in terms of potential, I think Gabe Baldwin might have the highest as a potential frontline starter. Blankenship, very obviously right there too. He's just got a little longer to go in terms of his development pathway. I'm really more than anything excited about all these Miami dudes: Crocker, Verdon, Jesus Jimenez, and Rosas. If all four of those guys start up in the majors next year, that's just such a fun group to watch. And going to be excited to see what this Rookie of the Year race looks like next year.
Yeah, that's pretty insane that Miami has legitimately maybe four of the top 15 Rookie of the Year prospects, and any of those four could be legitimate candidates. They're all so good. So that's a really good answer. Those guys are so nasty, super exciting. So hopefully, if you guys stayed till the end, you enjoyed all these episodes. And I know me and Tyler always have a blast talking about the prospects. So that's it for now. See you guys.